We want to use people speak. And for me, that principle goes for number one, I'm not talking about ratepayers, right? And we're not going to over-engineer things. I know utility industries, but we're talking about the person at the end of the light switch. We're talking about the person who's cooking over a gas stove. What will relate to them?
In today's utility landscape, customer expectations are shifting. They're looking for more than just reliable service. They want communication, transparency, flexibility, and even compassion. And the leading utilities are responding in kind. To understand this evolution, we're taking a two-lens approach on today's episode of Power Perspectives. One, from the national perspective of how utility customers feel, what does the data say? And two, from the utility front lines with one of the nation's largest public power providers is doing to turn customer satisfaction into customer success. Joining us to share those insights are two outstanding guests. First, we welcome Forrest Morgeson, Director of Research at the American Customer Satisfaction Index, the premier source for measuring customer satisfaction across U.S. industries. And second, we're thrilled to have DeAnna Hardwick, Chief Customer Strategy Officer at CPS Energy. And a reminder, you can catch every episode of Power Perspectives and Energy Central's other shows on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever else you get your shows. Subscribe, leave us a comment or rating, and don't miss our other podcast series you can find in this podcast feed, as well as Piloting the Future, where we learn about the latest in innovation. And I'm Jason Price, coming to you from New York City. And as always, I'm joined by Matt Chester, Energy Central's Community Manager and podcast producer, dialing in from Orlando, Florida. All right, Matt, before we bring in our guests, give us a lowdown of what's going on in the Energy Central community's view on customer satisfaction, why it's gaining traction, and what should we be thinking about as these guests bring these kinds of topics into the house here at Energy Central.
Sure, Jason. It's a great question. It's a big question. And while utilities will note that they've always cared about customer satisfaction, in reality, it's had to take a natural backseat in the past to concepts like reliability and compliance. But I think in today's landscape, we're seeing that shift in a pretty big way, with customer satisfaction being elevated to an even more top level concern to members of Energy Central, at least. And the drivers of that shift, I think they're pretty clear. It's, customers now have more options, whether that's installing rooftop solar, participating in demand response programs from the utilities, or even just the expectation for real-time updates that they get from service providers in other industries. So the value of engaging with customers and treating them as a partner, it's elevated. And then on top of that, public trust, it's even more essential than it's ever been when utilities are asking customers to support big investments, things like grid modernization and resilience, things that are happening more and more frequently in our growing grid landscape. So the conversation, I think it's evolved to be more than just how do we keep the lights on, and now it includes how do we create an experience that earns loyalty and builds that long-term engagement for customers. And so that's why I think today's episode and this topic, it's going to hit home for so many of our listeners at Energy Central.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just a hot topic. It's an important and critical topic these days. All right, so let's bring in today's guests to hear straight from them about what they're thinking about and how they're measuring customer satisfaction in the utility industry. So let's start with DeAnna Hardwick. Welcome to Power Perspectives.
Thank you for having me.
And Forrest Morgeson, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, thank you both. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for your generosity to join us today on the show. DeAnna, let's start with you. I want to get a sense of what utilities are thinking today when it comes to customer satisfaction. So when you report to the board and your fellow leaders at CPS, what are the customer satisfaction and success metrics that matter the most these days? And how has that evolved in recent years?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I've been in the utility industry here at CPS Energy for 10 years now, and I'm proud and excited to see it evolve. When I got here, we referred to customers as ratepayers, and every now and then I still hear that come through and I cringe, but at least I hear people know that maybe that's not the right phrase to refer to customers as, and the perception is growing that we need to understand more about what customer experience is. I still see that in the utility industry that we need we need to think broadly about the customer experience. I want to say probably about 2 years ago for us, we switched from just focusing on customer satisfaction to thinking more broadly about the customer experience. We started thinking about overall engaged customer relation index. So our board level metric and the thing that we talk about talks about the trusted brand measurement. It's how much does, when someone sees our brand, does it matter to them? Does it help or hurt their perception? What is their product experience? Do they trust it? How easy is it to use? Service satisfaction still does matter. So whenever they do contact our customer service department, still show up at one of our walk-in centers. We are one of the few one of the few utilities that still has a walk-in center. What does that experience look like? And then just overall, what does that mean about the impressions that our customers have about our utility? For us in San Antonio, we are public power, and a lot of people say, "Why do you care? You basically have a monopoly," but that's not how we look at it. We're owned by our customers, so we owe them, and we have the honor to serve them. So we need to step it up. We report to a board, and our board then we also get to report some things to our city council team, or our city council in San Antonio, and they expect high things of us. So for us, it's not just about sending an email or telling customers that we're doing things. It's about showing up where customers expect us and then measuring those results.
That's great. So just a fun fact, when I was a student, we used to call a customer load. So, that was another term we described the customers in this industry.
Yes, what I will say along the lines of that, since I've been here for the last 10 years, my folks, the folks on the poles and wires side, they keep reminding me that load is a tool. And I said, yes, but we don't treat our customers like that.
That's right. That's right. All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you. All right. So Forrest, over to you. We're talking about data. Data speaks widely in this industry. Give us a bit of a background of the survey data that your organization tracks. Give us a snapshot of what's the latest findings for the utilities and the customers.
So the American Customer Satisfaction Index measures satisfaction with several dozen energy utilities located across the entirety of the United States, including all of the major regions of the country. This study has been going on for well over 20 years now, so we've got a huge pool of historical data looking at energy utility performance in the past up to the present moment. The model's complex. We do a large amount of interviewing of actual customers of energy utilities, as well as the other industries that we measure. And the goal is we look at a series of drivers of customer satisfaction. That is, things that have an influence, positive or negative, on customer satisfaction. Some examples that are most important in this industry: service reliability, power restoration, mobile app quality are, of course, all important drivers of satisfaction in energy utilities. And we also critically look at outcomes of customer satisfaction. The critical ones here are customer loyalty, although to some extent for a lot of the providers in this industry, customers don't really have a choice. We still look at retention likelihood in the industry. And we also, and maybe more critically in this industry, we look at the outcome of customer satisfaction, that is a tolerance to price increases, or how unhappy you can expect your customers to become if you have to increase prices. Decreasing prices is obviously always a positive thing, but not a common thing. What we saw this year in this study is that the ACSI results show a small, slight 1-point decline in customer satisfaction across energy utilities, so in the aggregate for the industry as a whole. Though it's important to note that satisfaction remains significantly higher than it was during the period from 2020 to 2023. So we're still at somewhat of a higher level than we were during that really turbulent period at the start of COVID and all of the changes that brought to the economy, a little bit higher than at that point today.
That's great. So giving these surveying that you're doing, you must be identifying some trends. And I'd like to understand, or maybe you can share, what are some of these key drivers that you're seeing, how satisfaction is evolving, particularly, given the context, as you noted, that customer doesn't necessarily have choice. So how you measure and evolve satisfaction must be done differently than a traditional retail. Can you talk about that?
There are always in these studies that we put together big findings and then, interesting little tidbits that I think we can focus on and talk about as well. So there's a lot of data here, and it gives a lot of insight into what's going on within the industry. I think there's some interesting changes in this year's study that we can look at as well. And one of the more interesting findings for me in looking at the data this year was that there was a significant 3-point decline on a 0 to 100 scale in customer perceptions of energy utilities' support for green programs. And I found that really interesting, given that a lot of the industry is trying to position themselves as more environmentally friendly, certainly than the industry has been in the past. Many consumers are really becoming more sensitive to cleaner alternatives to traditional energy sources, of course. But for whatever reason, consumers seem to feel like the industry has taken a little bit of a step back in this regard recently. And I think it'll be interesting to see if this is just a blip or a more enduring change. Of course, this kind of thing changes over time due to political circumstances and economic circumstances. But I think this will be an interesting trend to watch in the future.
All right. Well, you've nicely teed up for DeAnna. So, DeAnna, are you hearing and seeing the same things for your customers?
It's interesting for us. We do see we continue to poll our customers, have one-on-one dialogue. For us, the top three things that customers tell us are important for us is their utility, is reliability, affordability, and sustainability. And it used to be affordability, reliability, and then sustainability. But after 2021 and Winter Storm Uri, not surprisingly, reliability reliability and affordability flipped. But what we have seen, and sustainability was of kind of a far third for the longest time, what we are seeing is that sustainability does continue to increase up. And we've worked hard at focusing on what our long-term plan is. And for us, we're calling it our Horizon 2050 strategy, and what we're planning on getting to so that we can maintain that reliability, that affordability, and make sure that we're getting the sustainability where possible. For us, what's interesting is our customers say they don't want us to use the word sustainability. They prefer the word clean energy. And I heard, Forrest, you use that language too. Our customers say, yes, we want you to have clean energy. However, do not sacrifice my reliability and my affordability for that. So I think for us, we've been very fortunate. We built our last generation plan in 2023 with our community, and we've been executing against that and giving updates. And then we're going back to the community starting in about a month or less to start talking about where we've been and where we're going. We promised we'd come back every 2 years to refresh it, to say, is this still the right plan for us? And how do we balance it out? And I think because there's been a lot more high profile situations with us closing down coal plants, having to talk through what that looks like, and introducing more solar and battery storage to the community, and talking about transmission constraints that brings. I think that the community here in San Antonio is hearing a little bit different from us than maybe on the kind of the broader scale across utilities.
That's great. All right. So you learn from the data such feedback like naming conventions, like let's use clean data versus clean energy versus sustainability. Get that. But let's pull that thread a little bit more. So the data does the talking. You're listening to the ACSI data that's coming back. DeAnna, talk about how you put that into action. How does your team make those actionable adjustments?
Some of it is just in the language that we present to the board. So I mentioned our Horizon 2050 strategy goals. So as we're rolling that out, by listening to feedback that we get from surveys like from ACSI, looking through it and saying, okay, so the customers are really relating with clean energy. How do we put that in our mission? How do we isolate that in our vision to show this is what our focus is? And then as we continue to provide updates, how do we align what our business goals should be and talk about it in that way? I'm going to use reliability. One thing that we're consistently trying to identify is how do we talk about reliability with our community in a way that's not just based on Sadie or Katie. Customers have no idea what that means, nor do they generally care if they're the ones suffering from multiple outages or long outages because they have underground versus overhead. They don't really care what the general person is experiencing. So for us, and we're every year we're trying to refine our metrics, and not just the metrics, but how we talk about them in a way that's more relatable. Our chief administration officer and myself, we try and say that we want to use people speak. And for me, that principle goes for number one. I'm not talking about payers, right? And we're not going to over engineer things. I know utility industries, but we're talking about the person at the end of the light switch. We're talking about the person who's cooking over a gas stove. What will relate to them? So that's either a business owner or that's a person who's struggling to pay their bill. What makes the most sense to them? Using that language in everything that we do, whether it be the billboard that we put up on the side of the street, whether it's the flyer that we're putting in their email that comes with their bill, whether it's that message they hear on the IVR, it's a consistent message that they're going to hear in a way that's tailor fit to who they are and what resonates the most with them.
That's great. It's such important messages, and the communication is key here. No doubt about that. Right. Your power is out, but hey, but the safety score is really good. Well, what does that mean? Why do I care? My power is out, right?
Right.
Happens all the time. All right. So let's stay with you, DeAnna. I'd love to hear about this program. I recall you sharing with us in the lead up about bundled care approach. So how does this frame CPS's energy ways of thinking, and how does it align with the key success metrics that we're talking about?
Absolutely. You know, I mentioned that of the top three concerns for our utility and for our customers really is affordability. And San Antonio is one of the top metropolitan areas with people living at or below the poverty level. And that is something that even before or after the economy shifts is our reality here in San Antonio. And so it's really important for us to find those people it's the underserved community, but it's not just underserved communities. It's people who have never struggled paying their bills before, who come into financial constraints and need to know how do they start getting assistance that they've never had to tap into before. So we do what we call bundled care. And bundled care is not just saying, hey, we're the local utility, we have these programs. And I think a lot of us as utilities have similar programs. We have an affordability discount program for those that are financially income qualified based on what their AMI is, or we have, a senior citizens billing program, different things like that we can offer. But at the same time, we also say if you qualify for our programs, you probably qualify for other nonprofit programs out there, like assistance from the food bank. You probably need assistance from a company who can support you if you are a senior citizen and you need maybe Meals on Wheels. You might need childcare assistance. You might need diaper assistance, like there's a company called Any Baby Can. So at CPS Energy, we have a group of folks. It's a small group of our community engagement team members that are boots on the ground, and they're our case managers. And they really go out, and when they connect with customers, they say, let's see what we can do to connect you with over 200 of our community partners. We call them Partners in Power, and we bring them together because everybody needs power, right? And we're the sole power providers. So through us, we can find ways to create MOUs to share some customer data where we can. We have limited resources in terms of either technology or PII shares where we can share that data. But where we can, how do we pass along data or just all be in the exact same place at the same time? So whenever that person who's struggling can go from table to table to table and be able to get all of the financial assistance in the same afternoon and feel like they were assisted and not feel like they've been degraded. So we really try to assist it. So like the average person that gets assistance through our bundled care program, just through the utility assistance alone, will probably get about $12,000 in financial assistance. But it's more than that. We've had people who didn't have a place, like when we knocked on someone's door because they were struggling and we weren't able to get in contact with them, and our data indicated that maybe they were struggling a little bit, and we hadn't been able to connect them, like I said. So we knocked on their door. We showed up at their house and we could tell that they'd been sleeping on the floor. We were able to connect them with one of our partners, and not only that partner was able to provide coverage for their utility bill, so they were no longer facing risk of disconnection. They also got them a mattress to sleep on. So it's more about treating the whole household and helping release that strain on the share of wallet so that people can be focusing on their lives and that we're helping connect them with the resources that are available in our city.
That's great. How long has this program been running?
We had probably been doing bundled care. I want to say we started putting the bones together during COVID. That's when we started seeing where people didn't know what resources were available. And we've just been building on that slowly. Our community engagement team was put together in 2014, and it started out just helping our critical care customers. But we've been refining them, kind of the team and the partnership really since then.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it sounds like a really well thought out plan. A question to both of you. And first, I'll start with you. On Energy Central, we have the C-suite all the time come on the show and talk about, what's going on in their jurisdiction. And customer-centric focus is always part of it. It's like the importance of the customer. But I want to ask both of you, and again, Forrest, start with you. What are the biggest barriers utilities face in improving customer satisfaction, and what steps must be taken to overcome them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I've been doing this a long time now. I've been working with the ACSI and working on customer satisfaction measurement and analysis of that data for about 25 years now. And one of the recurrent themes, something that we've talked internally about over that entire period, is how unique energy utilities really are when it comes to the mission of satisfying customers. And honestly, compared to many other industries, the utility sector has a really tough job when it comes to satisfying customers. And I think there's two pretty obvious reasons for this. The first is that energy utilities are to some extent at the mercy of global energy prices for driving the prices they have to ask consumers to pay. For a lot of other industries, if somewhere in the supply chain prices start creeping up on the raw goods that go into making the end product that you're going to ask the consumer to pay for, they can source those goods from somewhere else or use other creative ways to enhance efficiency to drive down prices. And this just really isn't the same situation for something like energy utilities. As global prices fluctuate, and these prices fluctuate due to a wide variety of reasons, but they're often what we would call exogenous factors, things that cannot really be controlled by the suppliers within the industry, like war and regional conflicts. Utilities have just less control over pricing than most other industries. And so this really sort of ties your hands to some extent as one of the traditional strategies for helping satisfy customers better is to manipulate prices through discounting and so forth. And you can't really do it in this industry in the same way, at least. Second, energy utilities are, to some extent at the mercy of weather, natural disasters, and other kinds of phenomena that can disrupt service and make service restoration more difficult and in some cases impossible. We had here in Michigan last year in the northern part of the state, one of the worst ice storms ever. And I remember getting updates because I have a winter home up there, and remember getting updates that it was the largest outage in the history of the county where this had happened, and 99% of households were without power. And I continued to get updates for a month after that, with them still, announcing new restorations, because they had not been able to do so because of the amount of ice that had fallen on the trees and all the downlines that had caused. Nothing you can really do about that, right? That is a natural phenomena that we can't control. All of this is not to say that utilities can't or shouldn't try to improve customer experiences. They have to do so. This is a critical mission of every business now. But I do think it is tougher and therefore more important as a job in this industry. Unhappy customers are expensive to companies. They're bad for brand reputation and company reputation. And so even in this industry, we've got to find ways to improve the customer experience.
Great. All right. And now, DeAnna, over to you. You've made some great success, and you're describing the progress you'd made at CPS. But what are some of those big wins you're looking for, those hurdles that are preventing you from getting to those big wins around customer satisfaction?
Absolutely. One thing I just want to say to something that Forrest mentioned is he's absolutely right. In the utility industry, people don't wake up or don't grow up and say, "Oh, I want to work in the electric company," because people wake up because people are so excited about talking to us. The way I explain the job that my folks do every day is I say my people wake up in the morning, get punched in the face, and then get off the phone call and then get excited and take another phone call to get punched in the face, but they do it because they care about their community and they care about what they're doing. And fortunately for me, I come from other industries where I come from insurance and healthcare, very similar in nature, where you don't get to, I'm not selling shoes. I'm not getting to dazzle you with anything sparkly or cool, right? Nobody wants to talk about those things. But at the end of the day, people are people. And so that's where I think the first part is like the bundled care. What I would say is a lot of people, peers will ask me, well, how did you convince your CFO to fund the headcount to do that work for bundled care? My CEO, Rudy Garza, says that his peers will laugh at him when he says that we still have people that go and knock on doors and still have walk-in centers. But that's because that's where our community expects us to. And then if you want to know the financial gains of that, back in October of 2022, post-pandemic, our past due accounts receivables were over $200 million. As of now, we've been able to cut that in half and reduce our write-offs significantly so that it's helping our balance sheet. So we're not doing it through disconnections and write-offs. We're doing it by having sustainable installment plans and getting people financial assistance that can help them. We have installment plans that allow people to stay current and also eat into their past due balance to the point of 80% of our customers are able to stay current on that installment plan. And that's I think we're second in the industry from what we benchmark. But I would say that's one of the first hurdles is financially, does it make sense? It does. You've just got to be mindful of what you're focusing on. First and foremost, you got to focus on understanding what your customers need and what the long-term goal is, and then work on it and refine it as you go. I would say another thing is in utilities, we like to overcomplicate just about everything. So the one thing that I spend a lot of my time talking about just internally is let's try elegant design. Now, nobody ever confused elegant and utilities in a sentence together, but it's what can we do? How do we approach things as simple as possible and only as complicated as necessary? And I was talking about this with someone the other day, and they're like, oh, that's not how we do things. But why not, right? How do we continue to shift our mindset like that? Because that's what sometimes we overcomplicate them so much that it's worse for our customers and worse for us. So continuing to find ways to move things easier makes it better for us and for the customer. And then I would say the other part and things that I say to my team is I always say, have you brought your friends along? I'm on a mission to say that we only have one set of customers, and it is the person at the end of the light switch or cooking over the gas stove. Internally, we are partners. And those partners, whether you want them to be or not, they're friends. And not everybody's going to look at things the same way or have the same expectations. But in utilities, and one of our values here is one team, is how do we work as one team, in my mind, working together as friends to help people think about things like the customer would in order to get the customer into a place where if we have to go for a rate increase, or if we want to talk about generation plans, we're able to do that in a way that's effective so that we move the needle forward. We get what we need to get done so that we can provide that reliable, affordable, sustainable power. At the same time, our customers are trusting us to do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes complete sense. All right. So back to you, Forrest. You have a macro view of the industry because of, the survey business that you're in. Can you give us some examples, whether positive or cautionary tales, about how utilities are making some big moves to move the customer satisfaction needle? Can you share some with us?
Yeah, there's obviously, because we have a lot of data, we have a lot of trends, but I think there are a few trends that we've seen in this industry over time that are worth noting. First, on the positive side, the utility industry as a whole has really made great strides in keeping outages to a minimum and reducing the duration of outages through investments in grid modernization and smart grid technology. As DeAnna mentioned earlier, I mean, one of the core function of this industry and this business is keeping the power on. We've got to have service. It is, not a discretionary good. We need to have energy for so much of what we do in our life. And so being able to modernize the grid and add those new technologies has really been a boon to the industry. And they've also used other technologies, and specifically things like mobile apps and text communications, to improve the way utilities are managing and communicating about outages. I'm, of course, not just a researcher, but I'm also a consumer of the owned utility industry. And it's really been impressive to me over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years to see how much better the industry has gotten just in keeping us informed as consumers about what's going on. When can we expect to get the power back on? What's the outage map look like? I can go on a website and see exactly where the outage is, how many families are being impacted by the outage, and when I can expect to get my power back on. And it really is, I think, very helpful. I think in, sum total, these improvements have certainly helped better satisfy customers. On the other side, on the negative side, nearly all utilities have imposed rate increases over the past few years. And this is something that's never popular with customers. Well, we know, and I mentioned earlier, that a lot of this has to do with simply a global energy market over which the industry doesn't have a great deal of control. A lot of consumers don't think about it in that way. They think about it as a pocketbook issue, and look at the bottom line and say, wow, I'm paying more than I used to pay, and this is, detrimental to my financial well-being. So that's always troubling. Not much that can be done about it, but certainly something to keep in mind.
You mentioned technology, and I want to ask DeAnna about this. So, I don't know what specific customer or technology investments or digital investments you're making at CPS, but now going from macro with Forrest to micro with CPS, talk to us about, some of those technology expectations that your customers are expecting, or how you're engaging with them, and what kind of an impact that may be.
Yeah, there's been so many, and we're planning on so many more. We're about to go, or we're in the process of undergoing an ERP transformation right now. So it's a pretty heavy lift. And so thinking about the end-to-end customer experience is a different perspective, instead of thinking about it just from the individual siloed utility perspective of, what do we need to do to get a street light out there? What do we need to do to build that street light? What do we do to ask questions about that street light? What is that whole street light experience? And how do we make sure that it's the right one? So that's what we have on our future. But in the interim, some of it is just how do we simplify the navigation of our website? We joke that, we don't always have the best of technology, and nor can we afford it. Our customers, again, affordability is important to them. So for us, it's how do we just give give things a little bit of a boost to make it more effective. So doing things like user experience testing. We joke that we gave our website a little bit of Botox. It's not a full facelift, but it's a little bit of Botox to make it easier to navigate using user experience feedback so that things are easier to find. I still might be it's not up to what we would want it to be, but it's still something that we can live with for now until we get some of the other enhancements that we're looking for. We changed to an outage map, or changed our outage map, I want to say about 5 years ago, and continuing to invest in that. But some of it is just how we communicate directly with customers. When we went to the outage map, we also changed our ability to get notifications to customers and getting customers what their preference was in email, phone calls, or texts about different things, including outages. And so now, whenever we believe that weather is coming, we send that message, and people joke. They're like, we're now the meteorologist. There was a funny story that one time our CEO was at one of his kids' sports games, and they were sitting there all in the stands, and everybody got their CPS Energy alerts, and they just sighed and looked at Rudy and was like, oh man, we're going to get weather. And people believe us more than they believe their app that's coming through. They're like, well, CPS says it must be true. And so that alone, just that alert from a survey perspective, has allowed us the perception around us being prepared for emergency situations and outages to increase and to improve. And so that it's not about the outage map, and we direct people to our outage map. It's just a simple communication to our community to say, hey, expect this. This is how you need to be prepared. And here's some safety tips as well. So it's not just about what's happening during that outage. It's what's happening potentially up to and following. But that's been probably the biggest impact to it from a technology standpoint. And then another one, and I mentioned this around kind of how our customers are engaging with us and how the perception around that, it's ease of use. So like I said, our website's probably not the easiest to navigate through. And so when customers who are struggling, who need assistance, they don't even know what the easiest, everything that they qualify for. So being able to build in what we call an assistance finder. So basically just typing in all of your information, answering a few questions, and then it does some calculations and saying, hey, these are all of our programs that we think you would qualify for. Would you like to learn more? And so it's presenting them in one simple way to say, we can help you. If you're interested, let us help you. We're not quite at the part where I like to call automagic, but until we get to automagic, it's still making the effort a lot better for our customers.
Forrest, I want to go back to you, and I want to understand how you're measuring customer satisfaction with what DeAnna's sharing is basically, these technology upgrades that are going on. How does that play into the surveying, and how does that, maybe you just share the experience around what that means for utilities in the grading category as it continues to modernize in this category?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And from the ACSI perspective, I mean, what we've been doing for 30 years now is measuring satisfaction with a whole bunch of different industries. And we use sort of a generalized model where we look at some core questions that are significant drivers of customer satisfaction across industries. And then the outcomes that I mentioned earlier, things like customer loyalty and price tolerance. Over the last 20 years or so, and always to some extent for energy utilities, because it is a unique industry, we add in some additional what we call customer experience questions. And those are industry specific, and they're something that is a little bit more of a living and dynamic organism. I mean, we look constantly at what's going on within industries, changes to things like channels that have happened so much over the last 15 and 20 years as we've gotten mobile apps and as we've gotten websites that are high functioning and allow us to do a great deal more when it comes to communicating with customers. We've added questions and metrics in that allow us to look at that. And so we look at things like mobile app usage, the quality of the mobile app, the quality of the website, and so forth as key drivers of customer satisfaction within the industry. And that's what's allowed us to see, how consumers perceive these, generally positive, and something that has allowed the energy utilities to have that kind of proactive communication that DeAnna was mentioning with customers in a way that's really useful. We may not be able to do much about the weather when it comes to the kinds of disruptions and outages that we have in the energy utilities industry. We can do something about notifying customers in as timely a manner as possible that we're getting this significant weather event. It's likely that this will cause, or there's some probability that this will cause disruptions and outages. Be prepared for that. That alone is an enormous boost to the industry and the kind of thing that improves relationships between company and customer.
All right. So I guess what I'm hearing is that as long as climate continues to change, as long as the energy mix continues to evolve, as long as technology continues to advance, the customer voice is going to continue to be very much the center of a lot of this. And you'll certainly be, both of you will be very busy for at least the next 20 years or so. All right. With that said, we now want to take a moment and pause to what we call the lightning round, which gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, the person, rather than you, the professional. So we're going to ask Matt to come back in. He's going to throw a set of questions at you. We ask you to keep your response to one word or phrase. DeAnna, we'll start with you, and then Forrest, you can respond second. And I guess, are you both ready?
Yes.
All right, Matt, take it away.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear, what is each of your dream vacation spot?
Ireland for me.
Cartagena, Colombia.
All across the world. What is the best gift that you've ever received?
Mine, I'm going to turn my camera a little bit, so I don't know if you can tell what it is. Back there in the corner, I have a little miniature drum set. Whenever I turned 40, someone gave me a condolences card and said, this is for when you used to be cool. I played drums, and I was going to be a drummer when I was growing up, but then I got into the utility industry.
For me, I don't know, but it's definitely something my wife gave me.
A safe answer. DeAnna, I think you kind of hinted at it, but if you weren't doing what you were doing now in the utility industry or what your job is, what do you think your career would have been? What was your dream career growing up?
Well, as a kid, what I was going to do, I was going to be a wildlife photographer and go hang out with all of like the big cats and go work for National Geographic. And then I figured out that doesn't come with insurance.
Perhaps sadly, being a data science nerd was my dream job, so I'm doing my dream job.
Great. Okay, so one of the things that we like to do is ask previous guests to leave a lightning round question for future guests. So I'm going to bring you one that our recent interviewee, Ruchir Shah of SkillNet asked. If today was your last day on Earth, what would you do?
For me, I take all of my family members and the few people I hold close, and then we just go hang out with all the animals. If it's my last day on Earth, then it didn't matter if they ate.
DeAnna's answer is much better than mine. Mine seems so selfish now, but I'd sit on a beach somewhere with my family and have one or several cocktails.
Love it. Love both.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yes. All right. So now it's your guys' turn to leave a question for one of our future podcast interviews. So it could be topical. It could be on the subject of energy and utilities, or it can be kind of a fun off the wall one.
I'll add one. I was in a leadership group a few years back, and I knew this person and I were meant to meet whenever the first thing she said was, I believe everybody should have a prison plan. What is yours? And I thought for a moment and I was like, I'd be the librarian. So my question would be, what would be your prison plan?
My question would be, do you personally believe extraterrestrial life has ever visited Earth?
Both of those are good conversation starters. All right. And our last one for each of you is simply, what are you most passionate about?
For me, I believe it's about making a difference. I've had the honor to work for Fortune 100 companies and now for a company that in the community that raised me. But it's not about the company. It's about the people that I get to work with and advocate for.
For me, it's learning. I'm most passionate about learning, and I try to learn something new and significant every day.
Nice job. Nice job to both of you. So, DeAnna, I just want to make clear that now that you're on the other side of 40, you're now cooler.
Well, I was like, I don't think it was about me turning 40. I think it was that I chose this instead of playing drums.
What about being on the other side of 50? Am I cool?
Coolest. You're the coolest. All right. Very cool to both of you. I love the spirit. And as I mentioned, we give you the final word. So why don't we start, DeAnna? Give you the final word, knowing that you've got a utility leadership audience listening in today. What are some takeaways and final thoughts you want to share?
I would just say continue to advocate for people, right? We talk about the poles, we talk about the transformers, we talk about all of the assets that we have. And customers are not assets, they're people. They're people at the end of a light switch. They're the person cooking over the gas stove. And remember what their lives are. We fit into their lives. They don't fit into our lives. So how can we make things as simple as possible and only as complicated as necessary and bring our friends along to make it an exciting and fun journey?
I think I'd say, or reiterate perhaps, that customer experiences and customer satisfaction are really critical to all businesses. And it's something that we can't forget. They drive customer loyalty, they drive our brand's reputation, and they ultimately drive the financial performance of our firm. If companies take their eye off this objective, they're likely to suffer the consequences. So I think it's something that we need to be reminded about constantly and think about that customer and the customer perspective as often as we can.
Customer and utilities, such a mix that has often been neglected and overlooked and so critical these days. So really great to have you both here to share your insight. And I'm certain that the community at Energy Central will have a lot of questions and comments, and stay engaged with the Energy Central websites to look out for any questions or comments that may come through to either or both of you. But until then, thank you again for joining the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Thank you. And as I mentioned, you can always reach DeAnna and Forrest through the Energy Central platform, where they welcome your questions and comments. Well, that was great, Matt. I really enjoyed listening to both of them. And it's such a critical discussion around, the utility and the customer. And it's something that is a constant that all our guests, who particularly those in the C-suite, talk about as well. So it's good to hear, the leaders and with the boots on the ground in this area talking about it, firsthand. So what stood out for you in the conversation?
So I think the interesting thread that I heard early on in the conversation was how the priorities from the customer side, obviously they change over time. I guess that's not too unexpected, but what sort of external events bring that about? And DeAnna brought up, Winter Storm Uri, which, had major impacts on everything to do with the utility sector in Texas and in their sphere. So how that, elevated the idea of reliability. Obviously a customer would always want reliability, but that kind of brought it front and center for them. And that created a need for them to make sure they were emphasizing that even more, not only in how they were approaching reliability, but how they were talking about it. So just seeing what external impetuses lead to that is interesting. And then even to the minutia of, she even mentioned how, well, their customers prefer the term clean energy over sustainability. And I thought that would be a pretty wonky distinction that maybe we would make, but the fact that the customers care about that is something that's interesting to track as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they covered a lot, but I think, pulling out some of the threads that they both touched upon was the importance of education, the importance of communication, and using technology as part of that method to educate and to communicate. It's really paramount, particularly, with the expectations of the customer to be notified and informed when their toothpaste being delivered by their retailer through the FedEx or, the system that's bringing it to them and giving it to them in real time. That expectation has just really set them high. So I think meeting that level of information and communication is just really important. And, should something, the system go down because of a storm, the customer, and they kind of alluded to it, is that they understand. There's a degree of tolerance that they will live with because of global events or climatic events. But showing that compassionate side, that informative side, that education side is a role that the utility needs to play because people's lives depend on the energy and the distribution connections that they have with their power.
We'd love to hear from our listeners in the comments on energycentral.com. Let us know what you thought of this conversation, questions you had for Forrest and DeAnna, or ideas you have for future episodes. So let's keep it as a dialogue and not a one-way conversation.
Absolutely. And again, thanks to our sponsor, West Monroe. West Monroe is a leading partner for the nation's largest electric and gas and water utilities, working together to drive grid modernization, clean energy, and workforce transformation. West Monroe's comprehensive services are designed to support utilities in advancing their digital transformation, building resilient operations, securing federal funding, and providing regulatory advisory support. With a multidisciplinary team of experts, West Monroe offers a holistic approach that addresses the challenges of the grid today and provides innovative solutions for a sustainable future. And once again, I'm your host, Jason Price. Plug in and stay fully charged in the discussion by hopping into the community at energycentral.com, and we'll see you next time at the Energy Central Power Perspectives Podcast.